Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, January 20th. This is the 106th day since October 7th. I wanted to start a little bit about what's happening in Gaza. According to Reuters, Israeli troops are advancing now in a major battle against Khan Younis. That's the major city in the south of Gaza. The Israeli forces are saying that that is the primary base of Hamas fighters, and so they are attempting to take over the city. It is also one of the most populated areas because that's where the more than 3/4 of 2.3 million people have been displaced. During fighting yesterday, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society accused Israel of firing on a hospital in Khan Younis as a major advance in the main city. They said that the advance is threatening the very few healthcare centers and facilities that still remain open. According to the Red Crescent Society, they said displaced people were injured due to intense gunfire from Israeli drones targeting the Al Amal hospital, as well as the rescue agency's base. The military said that they're checking the report, but nearby in the same city, Israeli tanks were also approaching Gaza's biggest remaining functioning hospital, Nasser, where people reported hearing shell fire from the west. Residents are also reporting fierce gun battles in the south. So the escalations in Gaza, the ground incursion, the bombing of Gaza, the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe of the lack of water, food, electricity, the health crisis there, all of those things continue as the war against Hamas rages on into its 106th day. What is the diplomatic future of Gaza? This has been discussed by world leaders who've been meeting at Davos. Diplomats were dealing yesterday with repercussions because Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he is opposed to an independent Palestinian state. This is what he said. He said, Israel must have security control over the entire territory west of the Jordan River. He said that from Tel Aviv on Thursday. He said, quote, it clashes with the principle of sovereignty, but what can you do, end quote. So we're seeing now increased tensions between the United States and Israel because the United States is saying two states. When the war against Gaza is over, the only answer is the two-state solution. We do know that President Biden spoke with Netanyahu yesterday. The White House did not disclose details of the call. While the details of the call were not disclosed, we did hear from John Kirby that Biden does still stand by the two-state solution, saying he recognizes it's going to take hard work and it's going to take a lot of leadership there in the region. Of course, we know that President Biden's own Democratic Party is quite divided over this issue. There are concerns continuing to sweep all over the world and the United States about the growing number of deaths of Palestinian civilians. And dozens of Democrats signed a letter on Friday urging the Biden administration to reaffirm that the United States opposes the forced permanent displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. In Gaza, there continue to be approximately 130 Israelis and internationals who are being held by Hamas and other militant groups. This group, the Al-Nasser the Saladin Brigade, said yesterday that an Israeli soldier it's holding captive had been killed in an Israeli airstrike. They released a video to media outlets, and apparently the video showed footage that he was being operated on. But beforehand, he spoke in Hebrew and urged Israeli leaders to reach a settlement with Gaza groups that would secure the release of the hostages. Other regional interests in terms of the broader Middle East. I mentioned yesterday that one of the things we've been learning as we've been talking and traveling throughout Jordan and Lebanon, and here I'm still in Jerusalem, is that this war against Hamas, this Israel's war in response to October 7th, this is already a broader Middle East war. The rhetoric that the U.S. is trying to stop escalations really ignores the reality that the whole region is already invested, significantly invested. For example, the U.S. yesterday again attacked Houthi rebels in Yemen. This was the 6th time. They took out an anti-ship missile launcher that was prepared to fire. The Iranian-backed Houthis say that their attacks on global shipping in the Red Sea are aimed at stopping Israel's war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. There were airstrikes this last week between Iran and Pakistan where 11 people were killed. That may be unrelated, but it's still escalations in the region, or I don't know that it's completely unrelated. There's long-running, low-level insurgencies that have been going on between Pakistan and Iran. It's unusual for either to attack targets that cross over the borders between the two states. The question is why Iran and Pakistan would choose to strike insurgents on each other's territories and risk wider conflict, wider escalation. The World Economic Forum conversations have indicated that Iran wants to be a part of any solution related to Gaza. They particularly don't want the West to be the only ones that are contributing to a solution, especially when the United States, Israel, and Saudi are in conversations about a possible normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. There's the possibility that Saudi would invest significant money in rebuilding Gaza. Normalization ties between Israel and Saudi could be a key element of ending the war with Hamas and would be a game changer for the entire Middle East. That was according to the Israeli President Herzog. He said that at the World Economic Forum on Thursday in the Swiss town of Davos. He said it's it's still delicate, it's fragile, it'll take time, but I think it's an opportunity to move the world forward and the region towards a better future. So one of the things we've been talking about here is that Israel wants to go slow, Hamas wants to go fast, Saudi Arabia wants to go slow, the United States wants to go fast. The world is saying enough, so you have all these tensions. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister said that regional peace must include or will include peace for Israel, and that they're certainly open to recognizing Israel as a part of a larger political agreement. And the Iranian coalition is really opposed to Saudi Arabia playing a greater role. That coalition includes Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and other Iranian-backed militias. So the question remains, what's everybody's interest? And it seems, at least in the rhetoric, the good news is almost all parties are saying they don't want further escalation. We're hearing this between Hezbollah and Israel, on the borders between Lebanon and Israel. We're hearing that even Hamas, we're hearing wants to have a negotiated settlement. And we're hearing that there is a desire for end of occupation, an end of the blockade, political determination for the Palestinian people. Of course, if Israel was opposed to that before October 7th, October 7th has made them absolutely opposed to the idea now, particularly because of the lack of safety, the lack of security, which is completely understandable. Israel wants the eradication of Hamas, which pretty much across the board, but even some U.S. officials are saying that's a completely unrealistic expectation, that there's no way, we're hearing Hamas is an ideology. And so the unrealistic expectation is Hamas will not be able to be militarily defeated. One solution that's being discussed is that while Hamas might not be able to be eradicated, it might be able to be demilitarized, or that Hamas's military capacity could be made ineffective. And it's important for Israel that they can claim a victory against Hamas. And part of that is because Hezbollah is much more powerful militarily. And the next step would then be to provide an alternative government and proximate steps for the Palestinians towards independence, self-determination, and a two-state solution, while also, of course, addressing the safety and security concerns of Israel and minimizing the frustration and the occupation and oppression of Palestinians. Many I hear in the U.S. also say, how can that happen when Hamas wants the eradication of the state of Israel? And I've learned a lot in terms of what's written in terms of Hamas's charter. The people of Hamas are also not monolithic, just like the government of Israel is not monolithic. I also think it's important to note that there was a 2017 Hamas manifesto that had 3 significant departures from the initial Hamas charter in 1988. The 3 things were, one, that Hamas accepted the establishment of a Palestinian state separate from Israel. This was huge in 2017. The second thing was that it differentiated between the Zionist entity and the Jewish people, which was quite significant. And the third was that the document did not reference the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood. And I'd encourage people to take a look at that. So here's the summary. We must continue to condemn all actions of violence, from the horrific acts of October 7th to the ongoing hostages held in Gaza who desperately need to be released, to the thousands of Palestinian prisoners who've been held without due process. Or we're hearing about makeshift prisons in the desert of Palestinians who've been taken from Gaza and are disappearing and being interrogated. The bombing of Gaza has to stop. Younis is where there are hundreds of thousands of residents who have been displaced like cattle and held as refugees between the sea and borders. They're trapped, and then human-made weapons of destruction are being dropped upon them. The killing has to stop. Enough. Call for a ceasefire now. Move towards negotiations, a long-term resolution that will address unresolved issues that have gone on for decades. Borders, refugees, safety, security, the occupation, the right of return, water rights, Jerusalem, prisoners. Killing will only harbor more hatred, not only here in Jerusalem, but between Israelis and Palestinians throughout the Middle East and the world. Enough hatred. It is time that this crisis be resolved for the sake of all people, for the sake of Gaza, for the sake of Israel, for the sake of Palestinians, for the sake of the Middle East. May God go before us in our collective efforts toward peace. Amen.